From now on, barring technical difficulties, I'll be recording every class. I hope you all got the link I sent out. I'll be posting all these YouTube lectures in our YouTube playlist, so if you miss a class and you need to catch up on the material, all you have to do is look for the right date. Now, you may see lectures in there from previous classes. Just look for the dates. You should be fine. If you're still having any trouble with Blackboard, I had emails from a couple of students who are dealing with the Blackboard for the first time. If you have trouble, get a hold of me. And again, our first exercise, which is, yes?
Will the recordings be on Blackboard, like the link on Blackboard?
No, the link's actually right in your syllabus, so you just go right to YouTube.
Okay.
Yep, and if you have any trouble getting that, just send me an email, I'll send you a direct link.
Okay. Am I putting the link in Blackboard?
No, actually, I can do that too. But I think I sent you guys the link in the email.
Yeah, you sent it in the email, but it would be more...
Okay, what I'll probably do is put a folder in there marked like resources or something, and you'd be able to get to it right from there. Would that be okay?
Yep.
Excellent.
Thank you.
No problem. Guys, a couple of things in the news, because I always like to give you some context for why we're talking about these things, why we're talking about these issues. If I ever say the acronym NLRB, that stands for National Labor Relations Board. And it's something we'll talk about more when we get into the legal side of HR. But basically, that's the part of the government that makes sure companies are not engaging in unfair labor practices, doing terrible things to employees, or otherwise unethically running their businesses. And they've come out with a decision now that companies that use franchises are now going to be responsible for working conditions in those franchises. How might that affect small franchises? When I say franchises, can anybody tell me an example of a franchise? McDonald's? Subway. Oh, Subway. We're going to be getting into all Subway's HR problems later this semester. What's another franchise that goes along with McDonald's and Subway? Burger King. Wendy's. Who here has ever been in a really, really nasty McDonald's? Okay. Who's ultimately, at this point in time, responsible for the condition of that facility?
The current manager, whoever owns the restaurant.
Absolutely. This change in the law basically says, oh no, that's not good enough. If you have a parent company and somebody has an issue, say for example, I'm working at McDonald's and I spill fryer grease and burn my hands, that's no longer just a local HR issue. That's a working condition issue that the folks at the parent company could be responsible for. If you are somebody at McDonald's and this is coming down the pipe, what are some things that are going to be entering your mind? What's your thoughts about this, please?
You're going to have higher up, like, surveys, inquisitions, looking around, people checking out your restaurant a lot, coming in just to make sure quality control efforts.
Absolutely. And to that end, in addition to McDonald's, because we're using them as our conversation piece, what other groups might be interested in coming in and checking out the working conditions in your facility? Competition, that's good. To say, wow, we don't want to be like these guys. Who else? This is something that most employers cringe when they hear this word. Health inspector's good too.
That's what I was
Health inspector, okay, that's good. You guys are getting so close because it's regulatory. I'm sorry? Corporate? Let me say that one more time.
Unions.
Oh, you said the U word. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Why would unions see this as an opportunity? It's a trick question because we haven't gotten there yet. The whole impetus of unions in the United States came out of bad working conditions. If you want to know, when I say this, guys, I'm putting this out there for you all. I don't have a bias for or against unions. I'm not a union buster, and I'm also not somebody who thinks everybody in the world should be in a labor union. I'm pretty moderate on the issue. But the bottom line is we wouldn't have labor unions if we didn't have problems with working conditions. I'm going to cover this later in the semester. Does anybody know in the United States why we have labor unions? Can anybody think of a specific industry or two? Yes?
Isn't the coal mines?
Absolutely. Guys, if you go on Google, you will find pictures from the early 1900s in the United States of 12-year-old children wearing mining helmets because they were going to work. If you go to Duncansville and go to the Antique Depot, you can buy child-sized mining apparatus because children who weren't old enough to go to high school were going into the ground and digging coal by hand. They worked in factories. We had working conditions in this country that we would equate with places like China and Iraq, and they were in this country. So the bottom line is anytime there's a bad situation, the unions have to try to come in and remedy it. In this situation, if they're seeing this is an endemic problem, it gives them fodder to be able to come in and say, yes, we should unionize, we should organize. If a union wants to come into a facility, what is an employer's general response? Are they for or against it? What are your thoughts? And why is that? Why would an employer be against the union? Any thoughts? Please.
Because they're usually trying to get the employer to add things to the business that will cost money. What do you think about like spending money?
Gold star. A union is never going to come in and tell you to pay people less. A union is never going to come in and say, work people fewer hours. A union is never going to come in and say, give employees fewer resources. It's going to be all about giving those people more. So, yeah, this is a big issue right now. And if you're McDonald's and all of a sudden you're going to be having to take direct oversight of facilities, that's going to cost you a lot of money to some people out in the field. We're going to be following this issue as the semester goes along because this goes hand in hand with things like the $15 minimum wage and the idea of people in what we typically consider to be entry-level jobs unionizing and organizing. So keep your eyes open for that. Second question. Anybody been following what's going on with the stock market? What's going on with the stock market right now? It's going gangbusters and crazy and up and down. Anybody know what it's tied to? What some of the theories are? Some of the theories are essentially in China. Well, let's recap here. Back in the United States, what happened here in 2008? We had the financial crash, the housing market, the bubble burst. Well, what's going on in China right now? They're going through very similar issues with their stock market potentially bottoming out or having what we call market readjustment. As a result, the average person in China is putting off purchasing cars. And they're not investing in the stock market. They're not buying big ticket items. Their economy is down to 7% growth, which we love 7% growth in this country. That's down from 14%. So all of a sudden the market here, because we're so heavily invested in China, is going crazy because people can't figure out if this is a correction or a bust. We don't know what's going to happen. Why would this be a human resources issue in our country if the stock market's going nuts?
People's like retirement portfolios are going down.
You better believe it. If everybody in this room, I bet, by show of hands, who's heard your parents talk about their 401k? Absolutely, that's invested in the stock market. There are people who lost thousands of dollars of their retirement in 2008 because the market bottomed out. Guys, think about something here. Say, for example, I know it's hard to believe, I'm a good bit older than you all. When I hit retirement, say I'm getting my last years of earning, I'm 62 years old, I got this big fat retirement coming, and I can't wait to retire. And all of a sudden, the market tanks. I can work another 3 years and hope things recover, or I can leave losing thousands of dollars. What am I likely to do? Unless I am really hating my life, I'm going to work and hope the market recovers. Well, what's the result of a highly paid old fart like me sticking around another couple of years? What happens?
Unemployment.
Yeah, well, why is that?
Because young people who have my job.
Yeah, so I'm basically occupying a seat that nobody else can get promoted into. All of a sudden, because I've been around and I have knowledge of the company, that knowledge isn't going to other people. I might not have successfully passed it on. By me sticking around, I'm hurting the economy and I'm hurting other people and young folks from being able to get into the market and get jobs. So that's where it comes into being an HR issue. The HR remedies for this, even though human resources departments are not typically run by stockbrokers, is to try to educate people about diversifying their funds, because ultimately your gateway to your retirement is still usually through your human resources department. So that's where stock markets have a direct effect ultimately on your employees. So it's something to consider when we're getting into this stuff. And I promised you guys in our last class session that I would play this video, and I think I have the audio figured out. So because it is Friday and everybody's back for your first week, you're going to get the gift of 4 minutes without me talking. This is the HR professional that I hope ultimately you do not become.
This is the worst. You are the worst. I hate looking at your face. I want to smash it.
So Michael Scott, for anybody who hasn't watched The Office, is the officer of Dunder Mifflin's branch in Scranton.
When I was a kid, my parents got divorced. They both wanted custody, and they both asked me to testify against the other one.
I tried to talk to Toby and be his friend. But that is like trying to be friends with an evil snail. Hey, Nelly. If I had a gun with 2 bullets, and I was in a room with Hitler, Bin Laden, and Toby. I am so sick of February.
The source from the sure doesn't feel that way.
I would shoot Toby twice. Oh. Toby, can I really tell you anything? Of course. Why are you away here?
Yeah, Toby, the HR guy.
Honestly, every time I try to do something fun or exciting, you make it not that way. The other night, I was sitting at the table eating my penis. I mean peas. That was weird. That's weird.
I have an announcement to make. I am moving to Costa Rica. This is a picture I've been carrying around my wall for about 6 years. It's the sunset beach in Costa Rica, Playa Grande. I take it out when I get stressed or depressed. I really calm me down.
Hey, we're not all gonna sit and circle it in style, right?
Get out. No, this is not a joke. Okay? It's offensive and lame. So double offensive.
Never thought I'd get to live here. But it turns out they built these great new condos there, so this could be me right around where the trees used to be.
Oh, I'm the female.
Let's see.
If there's one thing I hate more than the mafia, it is a liar.
So, just gonna hop the fence and jog all night.
So anyway, you guys get the point. Toby Flemingson is the HR guy in the office, and he's kind of an interesting stereotype of what HR people tend to be viewed as. What, just from your brief acquaintance with Toby and maybe any other experiences you've had with the office, what words would you use to describe this guy? Any thoughts? I'm sorry? He is very awkward. Is he a dynamic guy? No, he's not dynamic at all. I mean, even the brown suits, like every day with the brown suits and the weird comb over and just like the crooked tie. This guy definitely no charisma, and he's all about pushing paper. That is the stereotype of an HR professional, which is why I wanted to show it to you on the first day of class, but we did get it in today. So keep Toby in mind throughout the course of the semester and try not to be Toby. We were talking about core competencies and corporate culture when we last left off. There were a few things that I kind of glazed over to get us into our discussion and exercise. I am going to be covering a little bit. What I really want you to remember from our conversation, things that might pop up on an exam would be, what is a core competency? Or to say, for example, if I were Apple, what is my core competency? To put that out there, because we talked about Apple. What would be Apple's core competency? He summed up pretty easy. Anyway, please. Yes?
The brand value?
Brand, absolutely. That would be more of a corporate identity, but what is their ultimate competency? What do they do well? Software, tech, that's the core competency. And that's how we build our organization to be different and competitive compared to other organizations. So when it comes right down to it, our HR, Human Resources Management Department, comes into play in terms of us helps us take best advantage of the skill sets we have within our departments to focus on our core competencies. In other words, what are our people good at? What do we want to build? And how do we make best use of the skills we have to accomplish the goals we want to accomplish? And again, this was a diagram from last class, but I want to emphasize it. In terms of human resource management itself, can be one of your core competencies. We could say Apple's core competency is building tech. We could say that Ford's core competency is building pickup trucks. But ultimately, one of our less publicized core competencies is very effectively using the people, the humans in our organization, to be able to accomplish those tasks. So we're focusing on productivity, we're focusing on customer service and quality, and we're focusing on maintaining our organizational culture. I know we covered organizational culture and what it is. In other words, we know IBM, they wear blue pinstripe suits. We know if we work at Starbucks, we're probably wearing a polo shirt in an informal environment. Why is it important to maintain our corporate culture? Why is that important to a company? I mean, we know we want to sell good products and services. We know that we want to have good people. Why is maintenance of that culture so important? Yes?
So people can better identify you.
Absolutely. Like, what's a store where you like to shop? Or a restaurant you like to go to?
I worked at Olive Garden.
Okay, Olive Garden has got a very specific culture. When you walk in the door, how many steps is a customer in the door before they're greeted?
Less than 10.
Absolutely. It's friendly, it's open. People are talking to you, making eye contact from the moment you walk in the door. If you walk into Saks Fifth Avenue, say for example, I'm wearing my cargo shorts and one of my Batman t-shirts, and I walk into Saks, how many people are going to wait on me? Is anybody going to even talk to me, or are they going to escort me from the building? That's important, though. They're establishing their brand. That is their public face, and their human resources department absolutely backs that up with the way they pick employees, from the way they look, carry themselves, and interact with customers. So yes, snob value can be built in through HR. Sounds crazy, but it's true. Now, guys, we're going to get into some of the more functional stuff here today. There is something we call productivity. There's something we call unit labor cost. We start talking about HR metrics. Productivity basically means what is the quality of the work that's being done? How productive is our company? Are we making good use of resources? Are we efficient? The unit labor cost comes down to the average output of a worker. When we start using these terms, productivity and unit labor cost, what kinds of businesses would these kinds of terms apply to more readily? We want to talk about unit labor cost and overall productivity. What kind of business or industry would we be worrying about this in? Would it be education or would it be building cars?
Building cars, manufacturing units.
Exactly. There are certain businesses that are easy to quantify and certain ones that are not. How, as an instructor at St. Francis University, how would I quantify the success of whether I'm doing a good job in the classroom or not? It's very difficult to do. I can say, well, my students are doing well. They're doing well in the workplace. They have a high placement rate to which I played a part, I would hope. But it's not as linear as this. These kinds of measures make a lot more sense in businesses that build things. So how do we improve productivity in an organization? This is basic management theory and stuff that you guys have already probably seen in some of your classes, but we're going to recap it just to know what you're getting into. The purpose of this whole chapter is to really paint a picture of what human resource management is all about. So some things we'd be getting into. We wanted to increase productivity. How about this one? Everybody loves the sound of this. Organizational restructuring. If I say, hey guys, good news. Organizational restructuring is happening. What is your reaction to that statement? Is that a positive or a negative statement? Why is it negative?
Well, for some employees, restructuring means change, and of course, people are hesitant to change, so
Absolutely.
there would be a negative connotation to it.
When employees think change, what do they generally think? What's going to happen? Job cuts. Yeah, we're restructuring. Somebody's getting canned. Somebody's losing their job. I sure hope it isn't me. But in terms of restructuring from a corporate level, it can make sense. Restructuring can improve our productivity. Sometimes, I'll give you a great example, guys. Have you ever been in a situation, actually I'm going to ask 3 questions. Who here hates teamwork? Who here hates working in teams, like in terms of doing group projects and that sort of stuff? Most people, well, you're stuck in one now, but Most people hate group projects. And why do most people hate group projects?
Not everyone carries their own weight.
There's dead weight. Are there not situations where having fewer people actually makes things more productive? As the old expression goes, too many cooks can spoil the soup. And so sometimes restructuring makes sense. Redesigning work. When we start talking about this, let me ask you, have you ever been in a situation where you had somebody tell you how to do something and it made no sense at all? Where you could have come up with a better way to do it? That happens in the corporate world all the time. We say to ourselves, why are we doing things this way? It could be something as simple as reorganizing the steps in which we build something to changing our supply chain. Redesigning work can make your company more productive. HR can play a role in that. And if you had to think about somebody who came up with an innovative way for building things, what name would jump to the front of your heads? Think about somebody who came up with a neat way to build something. First modern manufacturing line. Ford, absolutely. You know what? Here's another random factoid for you, too. What was Henry Ford's most famous quote about variety?
You can have a Ford in any color as long as it's black.
There you go. That was his view on variety. But he redesigned work and came up with a modern production line, so that made a lot of sense for productivity. Now, in terms of aligning our HR activities, we've got HR in just about every company in the world that we interview. We try to hire people. We try to put people in the right spot. We want to align that with the activities of our organization. We want to make sure we're making good hiring decisions. If I were running a company, let's try to think of something you guys would like. Say, for example, I run a company that builds smartphones. I'm the new competitor to Google and Apple. And I want to hire the best and brightest to come into my company and say, we're going to make the most kick-ass smartphones in the market, and you all are going to want to get rid of your iPhones and your Google phones. You're going to buy my phone. I'm interviewing people to bring into my company. I own the company. I got lots and lots of money. And I've got HR people who are very good at HR. But in terms of picking the people who are going to build those smartphones, are HR people and company owners the most knowledgeable people on how to build smartphones? No. Who would I want interviewing these people?
The technical people?
Absolutely. I want technical people involved. Maybe people who are experts in user interfaces. The bottom line is you want to know what your company's strategy is, what you want to accomplish. And sometimes you have to train people even to be able to do interviewing. You have to train people who maybe are not professional interviewers, but are professional smartphone builders. How do we do this? And you also want to align your HR activities with the strategies of your organization. That comes down to how you're paying people. That comes down to how you're selecting people, how you're managing people. Those are all things. And finally, outsourcing analysis. Is outsourcing a good or a bad thing? What do you guys think? If I say the word outsourcing, what reaction do you have to that word? Please.
Like bringing work to other countries.
Bless you. Absolutely. But if say, for example, you work for a company and you hear the word outsourcing being mentioned in meetings, do you have a positive or negative response emotionally to hearing that word?
Negative. You're dealing with work.
Absolutely. Well, I'm here to say there are reasons why outsourcing can be a very ethical and good thing to do. What would be a situation where outsourcing could be a positive for your company?
Outsourcing helps in getting things done at a lower cost.
Absolutely.
So, which is why we outsource.
That the cost is one issue. What might be another reason we would outsource? Yes.
You can't afford to keep your company open if you still run it in the U.S. So, like, instead of cutting every job, like, maybe you keep, like, your headquarters here and then outsource so you're not losing.
That's very true, too. You guys are very right on with the cost factor. Is there another reason I might choose to outsource? Skills. For example, if I run a bicycle shop and I build custom bikes, and I know nothing about accounting, am I going to hire a full-time accountant twice a year? No, I'm going to hire somebody to do my taxes. So that's a form of outsourcing. There are reasons why we do that, and it's the job of human resources management to work with the administration of a company to determine what are relevant levels of outsourcing. So guys, in terms of HR, something a lot of people don't realize is the effect that human resource management ultimately has with the customer's response to your company. By show of hands, actually I'm going to ask for somebody to share their story after the show of hands. Who here has ever had a terrible experience eating out? Anybody care to share their experience? What's the worst time you've ever had at a restaurant? Somebody, please. This is a fun thing to share because you can bash anybody you want. Who would like to share their experience? Please, somebody, or I'm going to go sit in the back of the room and pretend to be somebody else. Please.
Okay, so just recently there was like a big group of us, like Champs does like $1 nachos on Tuesdays. And there was a big group of us who went there, probably like 15 of us. There were like 5 that like weren't even eating, they were just kind of there. And a few that just got water, and then a few of us who got like the nachos. And our waitress, like, she should expect big groups, like we go in every week, and she was just really, really rude. And like she took forever with like drinks and food, and like usually it's like real quick. And then like we left, and apparently she was like complaining to another table that we didn't tip her enough, and said that she only made $4 off of all of us, which is, I left a $4 tip alone, so
wow.
like, there's other people who definitely left more. And she was like showing them our bills and stuff. She was like complaining about us to another table, so I was just offended that she was like showing our personal information to other people.
That sounds like a pretty negative customer service experience. Now, here's my question. Do you think it was just the fault of her being a jerk, or was there a management issue here? What do you think?
I think she's probably just
And the idea that somebody's just a jerk is possible. We would hope, though, when we interview people that we're looking for certain personality types or skill sets, we can weed that out. I would argue that when you have a bad customer experience, that also is a human resources management issue. In other words, was that person trained in how to be a good customer service representative? Was that person, were they reprimanded for doing this kind of behavior before? Were they given ways or tools to be better at their job? And ultimately, if that person remains employed and is still the same surly waitress, 6 months from now, then somebody in management there isn't doing their job. They're not walking around and checking it out. Now, that situation you just described, does that make you want to go back to Champs?
not really.
Yeah,
She
absolutely.
got fired though for it because it's against their policy to be showing like checks or something. Like people posted about it on Facebook and
Oh, wow.
tagged everybody in like Champs. Like one person who worked there saw it and like reported it to like the corporate, and the girl got fired. So apparently she's had like complaints and people don't like her. In the
Wow.
first place.
Well, then the system ultimately did work in terms of it got the person out of the system. Unfortunately, probably not in time to save your business. For the old expression is, for every customer that complains, assume that you've lost 10, because you have 10 people who don't complain for the one person who does. Yes, please.
I have a doozy of a story, and it's with Champs too.
I am all ears.
So it was the first time, it was like right after they opened, it was the first time we've ever been there. It was just me and my mom. And like, all of a sudden, my mom's a physician. She saw all the waitresses like panicking, and she's like, is there something wrong? Is there like, and apparently one of the waitresses, it wasn't our waitress, but she was passed out in the bathroom. They didn't know what was wrong. So my mom actually went in and like did CPR on her. She wasn't breathing or anything. And so she brought her back. Like, it turned out she had overdosed on heroin during her break in the bathroom.
Wow.
Yeah, so my mom did CPR on her, brought her back and everything, and then the ambulance came and took her. We didn't get like a thank you. We didn't get like any compensation from management or anything. It was insane.
Wow. There's a lot of interesting points in this story, but
Yeah, we haven't been back since, obviously.
I think I'm starting to think about not going to Champs. You guys have convinced me.
Yeah.
Wow.
I enjoyed yours.
The woman ended up dying, but like we didn't even get thank you or like anything at all.
Was
Yeah. Well, she brought back, but like they resuscitated her, and then she went to the hospital, but she was brain dead.
Wow.
Yeah.
I have to say, this is deeper waters than I was expecting to get into today.
I said it was a doozy.
That is definitely a doozy. I think with that particular issue too, and not to sound like too much of a joy boy bringing it back to our subject matter, you have to wonder how proactive the management is at an establishment. I mean, if you had to go by price and by the atmosphere in Champs, is it a high-end, mid-end, or low-end establishment?
Mid.
I would call it mid. Well,
Depending on which Champs you go to.
The Champs in Altoona with 100 taps, and if you take somebody out to dinner there, you're looking at a $50 to $60 tab by the time you're done. I call that a mid-range dinner. You have to wonder how proactive is their HR or their management team if people are shooting up heroin in the bathroom. That's something that you would expect to happen, I don't know, at like the Penn Ave and Crescent or something. But I shouldn't be recording this stuff. but at any rate, I would argue too, even with the gruesomeness of the story, that there are HR issues about it. So anybody else have I don't know that story's getting topped today. But anybody else have a doozy of a story that they'd like to share about a bad customer service experience? Well, if something comes to mind, feel free to share. And guys, in terms of our organizational culture, I know we talked a little bit about Disney, and we talked about Apple and all these sorts of things. And I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but I want to also make sure that you know about why this is important. Did anybody get to hear the Comcast customer service story last year? What happened with Comcast and a customer that was trying to cancel their internet service? This is a true story, guys. A caller, a female, was trying to cancel her internet service. She no longer wanted Comcast. I believe she was switching to DSL. The customer service rep on the phone refused to cancel her service. Basically kept her on the phone, was telling her she'd be crazy to switch because their services were so much better, to the point where she actually got tired of it and put her boyfriend on the phone. The boyfriend couldn't effectively cancel the internet service either, so he started returning the call, or recording the call rather. The call went viral in terms of its broadcast. And this guy absolutely was demeaning, was talking out of somebody, and ultimately wouldn't disconnect their service. Now here's my question. If he was encouraged by his training to use these kinds of aggressive tactics, and his job is dependent on maintaining these connections, and people not canceling their accounts, who's ultimately at fault here? In fact, if you guys are interested, I can play you part of the call. I've got it on. Would you like to hear it?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Hopefully this link works. I always have a little bit of trepidation about using internet resources in some of these rooms, so we'll see if this comes up. See if I can find the link that was on here. You know what, guys? If I can't find it on here, I thought it was a direct link on here. I will bring it into class the next day or two and play it for you. Maybe let you make your opinion then. Even sometimes the best laid plans don't work out. But the bottom line is this guy was demeaning and degrading. And here's my question to you: if somebody is taught to act that way, ultimately, is it the fault of the individual, or is it the fault of the company, or is it both? What are your thoughts?
The company.
Okay, so raise your hand if you think the individual. What about the company? Okay? And who thinks both? Okay. Would somebody be willing to tell me why they think it's the company's fault? Please.
They want them to use aggressive tactics so they retain customers, but then maybe they might have a quota. So if they don't retain this many customers, they could lose their job, or they could have a pay dock or something. So if someone's livelihood is riding on it, they're obviously gonna do what they're instructed, but to a more extreme.
Well, and to that end, most people who work in customer service on telephone types of calls, are they higher low paid people?
Look.
So we're talking people who might be working 2 or 3 jobs. Please.
I actually worked in a similar position for like a couple of days. So I had like
a couple of days.
Yeah, no, it didn't last long. It was awful, and that's why like hearing, like, I'm not saying that it's ever okay to treat people like that, but like after like having my own experience with it, I was like, I could understand why somebody would act the way they do. And whenever I had just graduated high school, and it was like a summer job that I was doing, and I had virtually no training. Like, they gave me like a little bit of like, this is kind of how you do it, and I was thrown into it, and I was kind of surprised. Like, they obviously recorded all of our calls and stuff, but I was kind of surprised about the fact that like I could have been doing anything, and until they listened to my tapes like later on, like they wouldn't really know about it. Like, it's not very heavily monitored when you're first starting out, and nobody's really like teaching you. You're just kind of doing it. So, but that's obviously like the company's fault because they're not providing like the proper training or the proper understanding. And it is just like there was a big whiteboard, and like every time you made a sale or whatever, like you would have to go up and it was like this like huge display, so everybody saw like how many sales you made or like what you did that day, and it was very competitive. And if you weren't doing it, you were getting very frustrated, and other people had more than you, and it was awful. It was the worst thing I've ever done.
What ultimately drove you out of the customer service business? What was the defining moment you said, screw this, I'm out of here?
I felt like for the sales that I was doing, I felt like the only people that were really buying the product were people who didn't seem to really understand exactly what I was talking about. Like maybe they were confused or like elderly or something. Like, and I was getting like a lot of people that were just like upset, and it was a bad experience overall. So I was like, I'm not gonna continue to do this. It didn't feel ethical. It was not fun. I had headaches from staring at a computer screen all day. Like, it was just awful.
Have you guys ever seen the ads for summer work where it says, awesome opportunities in customer service, $15 to start, all these things? I have to tell you guys a story. A friend of mine from back in high school answered one of those ads and showed up. I'm not kidding you. The job was cold calling people and pre-selling funeral arrangements. Could you imagine doing that job? He made it to lunch the first day. He left and he didn't come back. They called him. The employer called him and said, you didn't come back to work? And he said, yeah, I don't think I'm coming back. And that was how he left. But how, in God's name, do you make that job a rewarding experience? But that's what he was stuck doing. I don't know. I usually can find a bright side to just about anything. Well, I'll show you one other. This has nothing to do with HR. I actually, way back in the annals of my life, dated a woman whose job was to visit families whose family members had just died to ask if they could harvest their organs. I don't think just anybody can do that job. So anyway, just note this. No matter how bad of a day you're having, you're not selling burial plots over the phone, and you're not trying to harvest organs moments after somebody has died. So guys, back to the technical stuff. In terms of some of our management functions, we've got external things that focus on us or affect how we manage people. I'm just going to ask you this. You can see these things up on the board. What would be different about running a company from a human resources management perspective? What would be different about running a company in Altoona, Pennsylvania versus New York City? What would be different? Cost. Absolutely. Every part of that company would be more expensive in New York. What else would be different? I'm sorry? Finding workers, because there's more competition for employees in New York.
I guess the same thing, like the amount of people who apply to.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You would have different types of application processes. If you were recruiting for employers in Altoona, a very effective recruiting method for employees in an Altoona-based business might be what? You're hiring people. What would be a great way to find people in Altoona? I'm sorry? Colleges are great because we've got lots of universities around. We also have a lot of people who are blue collar, maybe aren't even internet connected. How will we reach them? Temp agencies. Newspaper advertising is still huge in this region for whatever reason. If we're advertising in New York, we might be using recruiting agencies. We might be doing online recruitment. We might even be doing international recruitment. And here's another one, too. What else would be different about operating in New York City and Altoona, Pennsylvania? Yes?
Labor laws are different in New York versus Pennsylvania.
Very, very good. And I'm going to add one thing that goes in a similar vein to what you just said. We're also talking different kinds of regional and global cultures as well. Are we more ethnically diverse in Altoona or in New York City?
New York City.
Exactly. You are more likely to have folks who practice faiths who need accommodation in New York City, or even diets that require accommodation, and places like your dining hall and your facilities. You got to think about those things as well. In terms of the environments that we're hiring from, if you in New York City, you're probably going to run into a larger concentration of college graduates, whether or not they're bachelor's or master's or even doctoral degrees. And the Cambria and Blair County region, I think the average, don't quote me on this because I haven't looked these statistics up yet this year, I think the average college degree statistics are something like 1 in 4. So about 25% of the population has a bachelor's degree or higher. It's going to be much higher in places like New York City. What might be some geographic HR issues? What might be something we need to think about in Loretto if we run a company and it's January? People are going to have a hard time getting to work. You might have to delay the start of work some days because of plowing the roads. You might also have to account for people who are sharing rides because they don't like driving in the wintertime. In terms of some of our political, social, and legal issues. In terms of political, what that really comes down to is in your region, what laws are in place, politically and legal, in terms of are people campaigning for more kinds of green management of facilities, which also can come down to HR functions, how you are controlling things like, not to sound too disgusting, but human waste, how you're managing your dining hall. All those sorts of things can ultimately become HR issues. And in terms of economic and technological HR functions, when we start talking about economics in the world of HR, what does that ultimately mean? If something's economic, it involves what? Ultimately, if I'm talking about something of an economic money. Yeah, absolutely. Where you're at means you're going to pay somebody something different.
Affordability.
Affordability, absolutely. If you want to bring in professionals of a given stature, they're not only going to expect certain paychecks, they're also going to expect certain benefits, which also cost you money. And the technological concern here is, how are we managing this stuff? We have mountains and mountains of paper. I hope not, but we still do in many cases. Or are we going to more effectively manage our human resources management using technology? Some of the other management functions you need to think about. We've been talking a lot about strategy and planning. Guys, this is the single biggest thing you need to think about from a legal standpoint. Equal employment opportunities. We don't want to be shutting people out of the possibility for employment. We do not want to be discriminatory. How we get people in the door, how we actually get our department staffed, how we're managing our talent. What that means is, we talked about this in the very first class. It's very unlikely the ideal employee is walking through the door these days. There's too much to know. So how are we going to take advantage of these expensive people and train them and manage their career path? Rewards. Check this out, guys. We talked about how rewards mean different things to different people. And I'll use this example one more time. If somebody's working at McDonald's, a reward could be, hey, guess what? I'm giving you a coupon for a free meal tomorrow on your shift. Lunch is on me. That could mean everything to that person. Or somebody who's at a high level, their $50,000 bonus for making $1 million in sales, that might be the reward they need. Finally, in terms of the other areas that are core functions, we want to make sure that we're preparing for bad things that can happen and protecting our workers, and also making sure that we are doing a good job if we have labor unions in our workplace, that we're collaborating with them and not hitting them at odds. Now, guys, I'm going to ask you something. Was there a situation this week? Let me think. I want to phrase this question. Can anybody think of a situation this week where a very terrible thing happened very publicly in a workplace?
The Virginia shooting?
Yeah. Basically, a reporter and a camera person were killed live on air. Did you guys hear about this? Do you know the whole story?
No.
It was a disgruntled former employee who showed up during a live broadcast and shot them both to death. And you may say to yourself, what possibly could that employer done differently to make sure this didn't happen? Well, there's a reason why when people start acting unusual at work that we report these things. Now, can anybody think of another reason why we take that stuff more seriously in 2015? Some incidents. Anything that comes to mind? Think about Virginia Tech. Think about Columbine. All these things technically were workplaces. These were places where people lived and worked and did things. And so, yeah, we have to consider how we do this. Is anybody here either an RA or does anything with student services? By show of hands.
I used to be an RA.
Where were you an RA?
I was an RA at Francis.
Okay.
This last year.
Gotcha. Did you guys ever go through the active shooter training?
We did the active shooter training,
Yeah,
yes.
and I have to tell you, for anybody who hasn't been through it, I've been through it here and I've been through it with a Drexel program. It's a very unnerving experience to go through that training and realize just how easy it would be for something like that to happen. So it is completely logical and reasonable in 2015 to think that you're going to need to provide that kind of training to your employees. And on that bright, shiny note, I'm going to end class for today. Guys, I appreciate your time and attention. Next week, we're going to be doing some in-class exercises, and I thank you for your time and attention. Have a wonderful weekend.